I never imagined I'd be standing on my expansive balcony, watching my ex-husband and his brother argue in what was once my dream home. My name is Olivia Taylor, and at 34, I've learned that life has a way of teaching you who you really are when everything you've built gets taken away. 5 years ago, James and I found the perfect lot in Oakwood Estates. We'd spent months driving through neighborhoods, imagining our future, sketching ideas on napkins over Sunday brunch. As an architect, designing our home was more than a project. It was the physical manifestation of our love story, every corner and window placement deliberate and meaningful. We'd talk for hours about the southern exposure for the kitchen, where I'd grow herbs year-round, the reading nook with built-in bookshelves where we'd eventually read bedtime stories to our children, the wraparound porch where we'd grow old together, watching fireflies in summer. I poured my heart into those blueprints, incorporating elements that represented both our pasts and our shared future. The day we broke ground, James handed me a silver trowel engraved with "Building Dreams Together" and promised this would be the first of many milestones we'd celebrate in our forever home. I still have that trowel, though now it symbolizes something entirely different. When James transferred our house deed to his brother behind my back, claiming family comes first, he couldn't have known that his betrayal would unleash something in me I didn't realize existed, a determination that would transform not just our property line, but the entire trajectory of my life. Sometimes the deepest wounds create the strongest foundations, and as I stand here now, looking down at what I once thought was everything I wanted, I realize that losing your dream can sometimes lead you to build something far more magnificent. This is the story of how I lost my house but found my power, and why I now know that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living larger. James and I met at an architectural conference in Chicago, where I was presenting my thesis on sustainable urban living. He caught my attention during the Q&A, asking the most insightful question about integrating historical preservation with modern, eco-friendly innovations. Later, at the networking mixer, he approached with 2 glasses of wine and a confidence that was magnetic without being arrogant. "Your presentation changed how I think about adaptive reuse," he said. And for the next 3 hours, we talked like we'd known each other for years. By the time we exchanged numbers, I already knew this was different from other first meetings. Our relationship progressed with the precision of a well-drafted blueprint. Weekend trips exploring architectural landmarks, long conversations about our design philosophies, and a shared vision of eventually creating our own home together. For 3 years, we lived in a cramped downtown apartment, saving every extra dollar toward our dream. I was building my reputation at a prestigious architecture firm, while James worked as a financial advisor, specializing in real estate investments. The irony isn't lost on me now. My career took an unexpected turn when I was selected to lead the redesign of the city's waterfront district, a project that earned industry recognition and came with a substantial bonus that finally put our savings over the threshold we needed. Every weekend for months, we drove through neighborhoods, evaluating school districts, commute times, and the intangible feel of different communities. When we found the lot in Oakwood Estates, I literally gasped. Old-growth oak trees framing a natural slope with perfect southern exposure, a small stream at the rear of the property, and enough space to create privacy without isolation. James squeezed my hand and said, "This is it, isn't it?" And I could already see our home taking shape in my mind. Designing the house became my passion project. I'd stay up late into the night, tweaking floor plans, researching materials, creating 3D models that we'd walk through virtually before making final decisions. Every feature was intentional. A chef's kitchen with a 6-burner gas range because James loved cooking Sunday dinners. A home office with built-in drafting table overlooking the garden where I could work on freelance projects, wide hallways, and 0-step entries in case our parents needed to move in someday. When construction was finally complete, we hosted a housewarming dinner for our closest friends and family. That's when I first met Daniel, James's younger brother, and his wife, Rebecca. Something about Daniel immediately put me on edge. Perhaps the way his eyes cataloged every feature of our home with an appraising look rather than appreciation, or how his compliments carried a subtle undertone I couldn't quite place. Rebecca seemed lovely, though, genuinely admiring the custom built-ins and asking thoughtful questions about the design process. During dinner, Daniel mentioned his recent promotion at an investment firm, speaking confidently about risk assessments and market projections. James beamed with obvious pride in his brother's success, toasting his accomplishments with expensive champagne. Looking back, I should have noticed the slight tensing in Rebecca's shoulders when Daniel described their plans to upgrade to a larger home. But at the time, I was floating in the happiness of finally being in our dream home. That first year was everything we'd hoped for. Morning coffee on the east-facing porch, dinner parties where James would proudly give tours highlighting my design work, planting the garden we'd planned during those apartment years, and falling. Asleep in a master bedroom with the perfect view of the moon through strategically placed windows. My design business grew steadily as I established a home office and began taking select clients, creating custom spaces that reflected their lives the way our home reflected ours. I thought we were building something unshakable, brick by brick, day by day. I couldn't have known that the foundation had already started to crack. The call came just after midnight, the harsh ringtone jolting us both awake. James fumbled for his phone in the dark, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as Daniel's voice carried faintly through the speaker. I caught fragments. Complete. Disaster. Could lose everything. Need help. Before James stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. When he returned 30 minutes later, his face was grim. Daniel's been let go, he explained, settling heavily on the edge of the bed. Made some investment decisions his firm didn't approve of. I expressed sympathy, of course, and asked what we could do to help. He needs to bridge some gaps until he finds a new position, James said vaguely. I told him we'd help. It wasn't until I was reviewing our joint accounts 2 weeks later that I discovered what help meant. A $10,000 transfer to Daniel's account. I waited until dinner, placing the bank statement between us before serving the lasagna. Were you planning to tell me about this? I asked, keeping my voice even despite the betrayal coursing through me. James looked genuinely confused by my reaction. It's just a loan until he's back on his feet. He's family, Liv. Our first real argument erupted like a sudden summer storm, intense and disorienting. It's not about the money, I tried to explain. It's about making major financial decisions without even talking to me. James's response still echoes in my mind during sleepless nights. Family always comes first, Olivia. I didn't think I needed permission to help my brother. Something fundamental shifted that night, a hairline fracture in our foundation. I tried to repair it by offering to help Daniel with his job search, leveraging my professional connections in various industries. I spent hours updating his resume, connecting him with a recruiter friend, even arranging an informational interview with a commercial real estate developer looking for someone with financial experience. Daniel nodded along during our coffee meeting, but his eyes held a dismissive glaze that suggested he was merely humoring his brother's wife. When I mentioned potential positions that might require a step down in title or salary, he cut me off mid-sentence. I'm not interested in starting over, he said with an edge to his voice. I have certain standards. Over the following weeks, Daniel and Rebecca began appearing at our dinner table with increasing frequency. What started as weekly check-ins became almost nightly occurrences, Rebecca offering to help with dishes, while Daniel pulled James into his study for brother talks that often lasted hours. Weekends that James and I had once spent on home improvement projects or exploring, hiking trails now revolved around helping Daniel network or revise job applications. Once, returning early from a client meeting, I overheard them arguing in James's office. Daniel's voice tight with frustration, James's responses soothing but firm. The conversation halted abruptly when I called out a greeting from the entryway. During a rare moment alone with James, I gently suggested that Daniel might benefit from financial counseling, perhaps restructuring his debt while searching for the right position. James's reaction startled me, a flash of defensiveness immediately followed by a patronizing smile. Daniel doesn't need advice on managing money, Liv. This is temporary. You don't understand the pressure he's under to provide for Rebecca. That night, James made reservations at the upscale Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement, ordering champagne and reminiscing about our early days. But even as we clinked glasses and shared tiramisu, I felt a new distance between us as though the evening were a performance we were both participating in, rather than a genuine reconnection. As we drove home, James reached for my hand across the console. "Thank you for understanding about Daniel," he said. "It means everything that you're supportive." I squeezed his hand and smiled, but inside, a quiet voice was whispering that I hadn't actually agreed to anything, and that somehow, without my noticing, the parameters of our marriage were being rewritten. 6 months passed, with Daniel still between opportunities, as he'd taken to describing his employment status at family gatherings. Each interview that didn't result in an offer seemed to have a different explanation. The company wasn't innovative enough. The compensation package was insulting. The corporate culture wouldn't value his expertise. Meanwhile, Rebecca had started reaching out to me separately, suggesting lunch dates where she'd pick at her salad while dropping hints about their deteriorating financial situation. "We've had to cut back on everything," she confided during one such lunch, twisting her wedding ring anxiously. "Daniel's applying for forbearance on student loans, and we're 3 months behind on the mortgage." I expressed genuine concern, offering to help them create a budget that might ease some pressure. "That would only upset him," she said quickly. "He says things will turn around any day now." I came home from that lunch to discover another unexplained withdrawal from our joint savings account, $25,000 this time. I waited until James returned from his golf game with Daniel, my anger simmering just below the surface. "I thought we agreed to discuss major financial decisions," I said, showing him the transaction record. James's response knocked the wind from me. "My brother needs help, and frankly, Olivia, you seem to forget that I'm the primary breadwinner here. Your architecture projects are nice, but let's be realistic about who built this house." The dismissal of my financial contributions, I'd contributed nearly 60% to our down payment from my waterfront project bonus, and consistently matched his income since, left me speechless. Later that week, searching for our insurance documents to file a claim for a minor fender bender, I found unfamiliar bank statements in James's desk drawer, an account I didn't recognize at a different bank, with regular transfers dating back several months. I didn't confront him immediately, watching instead for other signs of secrecy. They weren't hard to find once I started paying attention. James stepping outside to take calls, changing his email password, having hushed conversations with Daniel that abruptly shifted to sports or weather when I entered the room. Most concerning was James's new habit of meeting with Daniel and their parents without including me, family discussions from which I was deliberately excluded. The situation escalated when Daniel showed up at our door one Tuesday evening with 3 suitcases and a sheepish explanation about their landlord selling their rental property unexpectedly. "It's just for a couple weeks until we find a new place," James assured me, already carrying his brother's luggage to our guest room. Those weeks stretched into 3, with Daniel and Rebecca establishing an uncomfortable semi-permanence in our home. More disturbing was James's changing attitude toward the house itself. The passion projects he'd once enthusiastically tackled each weekend now elicited only disinterest. When I suggested repainting the dining room, he shrugged and said, "Why bother? It's fine as is." Our second major fight erupted when I found Rebecca rearranging my carefully organized kitchen cabinets. "We thought it would be more efficient this way," she explained, not meeting my eyes. When I expressed to James that while I sympathized with their situation, certain boundaries needed to be respected, his response chilled me. "They're going through a rough time, Liv. Can't you be more accommodating? This is their home too right now." James slept in the guest room for a week after that conversation, displacing Daniel to the sofa, creating an awkward dynamic where I became the villain in my own home. Thanksgiving arrived with James inviting his entire extended family without consulting me. I spent 3 days cooking and cleaning, only to watch as James's mother directed dinner conversation exclusively toward Daniel's job prospects and Rebecca's patient support during this challenging time. No one asked about my recent commission to design a local community center or acknowledged the elaborate meal I'd prepared. When James's father raised a toast to family pulling together in hard times, the pointed look he sent my way made it clear which family member was considered lacking in team spirit. As the holiday season progressed, I found myself increasingly isolated in rooms full of people. Friends began noticing the strain, with my college roommate Kate directly asking if everything was okay after observing James and me at her Christmas party. "You two seem disconnected," she said gently. "Is there something going on?" That conversation led me to research marriage counselors, carefully selecting one whose approach emphasized communication and mutual respect. When I suggested attending together, James's reaction was immediate and definitive. "We don't need some stranger telling us how to fix problems we don't have. This is just a stressful time with Daniel's situation." I went to the first session, alone, sitting awkwardly in a waiting room decorated with calming landscapes, feeling like I was betraying James merely by being there. Dr. Hendricks listened attentively as I described the shifting dynamics in our marriage, the growing sense that my voice carried less weight than Daniel's needs. "What do you want from your relationship?" she asked toward the end of our session. The question seemed so simple, yet I realized I'd stopped considering my own wants entirely, focused instead on managing James's reactions and accommodating his family's expectations. I never scheduled a second appointment, telling myself things would improve once Daniel found employment and our home returned to normal. I couldn't have known then that normal had already been fundamentally redefined, without my input or consent. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, addressed to Daniel Taylor but delivered to our mailbox. I almost added it to the growing stack of his mail on the entry table without a second thought, but the return address caught my attention. County Tax. Assessor's Office, with our property address referenced in the corner. Curious and increasingly uneasy, I examined the envelope more closely, noticing Property Tax Statement, printed beneath the official seal. Why would Daniel be receiving tax documents for our home? I set the envelope aside in my home office, the question nagging at me throughout my workday. That evening, I casually mentioned receiving tax mail for Daniel, watching James's expression carefully. His momentary flash of alarm, quickly masked with practiced nonchalance, confirmed my growing suspicion that something significant was being hidden from me. "I'll make sure he gets it," James said, reaching for the envelope I hadn't actually brought to dinner. Property taxes are complicated this year with his situation. The vague explanation only heightened my concern. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, waiting until James and Daniel had both left before driving downtown to the county records office. The clerk was efficiently helpful, typing our address into the system, while I held my breath. "Here we go," she said, turning the monitor slightly so I could see. "Property transferred from James and Olivia Taylor to Daniel Taylor, recorded 3 months ago. Would you like me to print the deed transfer for you?" I nodded, unable to speak, as the document that shattered my world emerged from the printer. My hands trembled as I examined the paperwork. There was my signature, or rather, what appeared to be my signature on a legal document I had never seen, transferring full ownership of our home to Daniel. The date aligned perfectly with the mysterious bank account I'd discovered, the increasing secrecy, the changing attitude toward our home. Somehow, I managed to drive home, the world around me surreal and distorted through the lens of betrayal. I placed the document on the kitchen island and waited, moving through afternoon tasks with mechanical precision. When James walked through the door at 6:17, his customary greeting died on his lips as he spotted the papers. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he said finally, confirming my worst fears without a trace of remorse in his voice. "I was going to tell you once things were settled." The explanation he offered as we stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, the marble countertop I'd selected after weeks of research, now a physical manifestation of the divide between us, made me question whether I'd ever truly known him at all. Daniel had faced mounting pressure from bankruptcy proceedings following failed investments. To protect their family assets from creditors, James had transferred our home to Daniel's name, using a separate account to continue making mortgage payments. "It's completely legal and temporary," he insisted, as though legality were the primary concern. "Once Daniel gets back on his feet, he'll transfer everything back to us." When I asked about my signature, James had the audacity to look offended. "I knew you'd overreact like this. It was easier to handle the paperwork myself than deal with unnecessary drama." The casual admission of forgery, the dismissal of my reaction as drama, the unilateral decision about our home, each revelation was a seismic shock to the foundation of our marriage. "We still live here," James continued, his tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. "Nothing has changed day to day." That's when the final piece fell into place. Daniel and Rebecca's extended stay, their gradual rearrangement of our space, the strange comments about future renovations. "They're moving in permanently, aren't they?" I asked, already knowing the answer. James's hesitation was confirmation enough. "It makes financial sense," he eventually explained. "They can't afford rent while Daniel job searches, and this place has more space than we need anyway. We'll all save money." The magnitude of the betrayal rendered me momentarily speechless. Not only had James given away our home without my knowledge or consent, but he'd planned for us to become tenants in what was legally now his brother's house. As the implications sank in, I realized my name was no longer on any ownership documents of the home I'd designed, the space that held all my dreams and professional pride. "We can work out a rental agreement with Daniel that's favorable to everyone," James suggested, seemingly oblivious to the devastation written across my face. "Think of it as helping family through a difficult time." That phrase, "helping family," suddenly took on a sinister meaning, illuminating with perfect clarity that despite our marriage, I had never truly been considered family. I was an outsider whose needs and feelings were expendable when weighed against blood ties. In that moment, standing in the kitchen I'd designed down to the last cabinet pull, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Not in the way it had when we'd found the perfect lot 5 years earlier, but in the sickening lurch of realizing your entire reality has been a carefully constructed illusion. I packed a suitcase that night with mechanical efficiency, selecting essentials while James followed me from room to room, his tone shifting between defensive justification and incredulous disbelief at my overreaction. "It's just a house, Olivia," he said, as I carefully folded the quilt my grandmother had made for our wedding. "We still live here. Nothing has changed except some paperwork." His complete failure to understand the magnitude of his betrayal, the forgery, the secretive planning, with Daniel, the fundamental disrespect for our partnership, only confirmed I was making the right decision. When I carried my suitcase to the door, reality seemed to finally penetrate James's confident assumption that I would eventually accept his decision. "Where are you going? You can't be serious about leaving over this." I turned to look at him, one last time in the entryway of what had once been our dream home. "This isn't about a house, James. This is about trust, respect, and whether we're actually partners or just two people sharing space until something more important comes along. Apparently, I have my answer." I checked into a downtown apartment complex that offered month-to-month leases, a sterile, impersonal space with generic furnishings and blank walls that felt appropriately transitional for the limbo I now occupied. James called repeatedly during that first week, his messages evolving from defensive, "You're being completely unreasonable," to conciliatory, "Let's just talk this through," to manipulative, "Daniel and Rebecca are worried about you." I let each call go to voicemail, needing space to process the seismic shift in my reality. When I finally returned to the house to collect more belongings, I timed my visit for when James would be at work. Instead, I encountered Daniel and Rebecca in the master bedroom, our bedroom, measuring walls and discussing furniture placement. "The armoire won't fit in this corner without blocking the view," Rebecca was saying, gesturing toward the custom window I designed specifically to frame the old oak tree in the backyard. They both froze when they noticed me standing in the doorway, Rebecca's face flushing with what appeared to be genuine embarrassment, while Daniel adopted a defensive posture reminiscent of his brother. "Olivia, we didn't expect you," he said, attempting authoritative casualness in a room where I'd selected every paint color and light fixture. "James said you'd moved out." The surreal experience of being treated as an intruder in my own carefully designed space crystallized something for me. This displacement had been planned long before the deed transfer, possibly from the moment Daniel had lost his job. I collected my remaining clothes and personal items under their uncomfortable supervision, noting with detached interest that some of my decorative pieces had already been replaced with Rebecca's family photos. I agreed to meet James at a neutral coffee shop the following day, selecting a publicly busy time to prevent any scene. He arrived with a manila folder of documents and a practiced expression of reasonable conciliation. "I've been thinking about ways to make this transition smoother," he began, sliding papers across the table. "Daniel's drafted a rental agreement that's extremely generous. Below market rate, guaranteed tenancy for at least 5 years. I left the documents untouched between us. "You still don't understand, do you? I'm not upset about living arrangements or rental terms. You made unilateral decisions about our home, forged my signature on legal documents, and planned this entire situation with Daniel behind my back. Our marriage isn't a partnership to you. It's a hierarchy where your family's needs automatically supersede mine." James's response, delivered with patronizing patience, became the moment clarity crystallized completely for me. "Family makes sacrifices for each other, Olivia. Sometimes I think your problem is that you didn't grow up with siblings, so you don't understand how this works." In that instant, I recognized that the fundamental values gap between us was unbridgeable. We weren't arguing about a house. We were revealing irreconcilable differences in how we defined partnership, trust, and respect. During the drive back to my temporary apartment, doubt crept in. Was I overreacting to material possessions? Was my attachment to the house clouding my judgment about our marriage? I spent that evening researching therapists, eventually scheduling an appointment with Dr. Leanne Martinez, whose specialization in betrayal trauma resonated with my situation. During our first session, Dr. Martinez listened without judgment as I recounted the progression from dream home to nightmare scenario. "I keep wondering if I'm being materialistic," I admitted. "It's just a house after all." Her response provided the external validation I'd been unable to give myself. "This isn't about the physical structure. It's about the violation of trust, the deliberate deceit, and the disregard for your agency in major life decisions. The house is symbolic of the partnership that was betrayed." Over the next few weeks, I established financial independence, opening separate accounts and transferring my portion of our joint savings, actions that prompted increasingly desperate calls from James. Our final conversation occurred 6 weeks after I'd left, with James still insisting I was throwing away our marriage over a temporary arrangement. When I explained again that the issue was trust, not property, he countered with, "I was protecting our financial future from Daniel's creditors. You should be thanking me for being proactive." That night marked my emotional rock bottom. Curled in an unfamiliar bathtub in a generic apartment, sobbing until my throat was raw, questioning every moment of our 5-year relationship. Had there been signs I'd missed? Was I a fool for believing we'd been building something genuine together? I fell asleep exhausted from grief, surrounded by damp tissues and shattered illusions. But when morning came, something had shifted. A quiet spark of determination had ignited during the dark night, a recognition that while I couldn't control James's actions or choices, I could absolutely decide what happened next in my own story. 2 weeks later, driving past our old neighborhood to meet a client, I noticed something I'd missed during previous detours to avoid painful memories: a for sale sign on the vacant lot directly adjacent to what had once been our property. I pulled over, studying the undeveloped land with growing interest. It was actually larger than our lot, with the same beautiful old oak trees and natural slope that had originally captured our attention. What began as a fleeting fantasy, buying the property out of spite, crystallized into serious consideration as I jotted down the realtor's contact information. That evening, I spread property documents across my apartment's dining table, researching recent sales in the neighborhood, zoning regulations, and building codes. The lot was zoned for single-family residential use with generous allowances for square footage and height restrictions. More importantly, its elevation was slightly higher than our former property, offering potential for strategic design elements that would be visible from next door. The following morning, I scheduled meetings with 3 different banks to discuss financing options as a single woman with excellent credit but newly complicated financial history. The loan officer at Austin Community Bank, a woman in her 50s, who listened with unexpected empathy to my abbreviated explanation, became an unexpected ally. Divorce isn't finalized yet, but you're financially independent with strong income history, she noted, reviewing my documentation. We can structure a construction loan based on your individual qualifications. I accessed my separate savings account and made arrangements to borrow against my 401k for the substantial down payment, calculated risks that felt simultaneously terrifying and empowering. With preliminary financing secured, I leveraged professional connections for after-hours consultations, calling in favors from structural engineers and sustainable design specialists I'd collaborated with throughout my career. Night after night, I sat at my drafting table sketching initial designs for what was evolving from revenge fantasy to architectural statement. Working within zoning restrictions but pushing creative boundaries, I designed a 3-story modern masterpiece with strategic sightlines deliberately oriented toward my former home. The clear story windows of the great room would catch morning light and be visible from Daniel's new master bedroom. The expansive third-floor balcony would offer panoramic views, including an unavoidable perspective of the smaller house next door. Every feature James had vetoed in our original designs now featured prominently. The Japanese soaking tub, professional-grade kitchen with double islands, glass-enclosed home office with mountain views, separate wings for work and living spaces. I created a vision board filled with architectural elements that represented not compromise, but pure self-expression. Each selection reflecting aspects of myself I'd subtly suppressed during our marriage. My former mentor and architecture professor, Sophia Mendes, agreed to collaborate on refining the innovative design, bringing her expertise in sustainable building and dramatic use of natural light. "This isn't just a house, Olivia," she observed during one late-night design session. "This is your manifesto." With Sophia's guidance, I created a comprehensive proposal, including detailed cost calculations and financing framework. The numbers were daunting but achievable if I leveraged every resource available: savings, retirement funds, potential design contracts I could complete during construction, and a carefully structured loan package. When I presented my financial plan to Margori at Austin Community Bank, she reviewed the documentation with professional thoroughness before looking up with unexpected approval. "It's aggressive but sound," she concluded. "Your credit score and professional reputation carry significant weight." The day I signed the purchase agreement for the lot represented the most terrifying and empowering moment since leaving James. Initialing each page with my own name only, committing to a vision that existed solely in my imagination, and detailed blueprints. Standing on the empty lot afterward, I closed my eyes and visualized the home that would rise from this raw space, feeling for the first time since the betrayal a genuine sense of possibility rather than loss. The initial contractor meetings brought their own challenges. Several male builders subtly questioned whether a woman's project would have sufficient funding or clear direction. Their condescension evaporated when I presented meticulously detailed architectural plans and demonstrated comprehensive knowledge of building materials and structural requirements. Eventually, I connected with Westlake Construction, a female-owned company whose project manager, Elena Diaz, immediately grasped both the technical and emotional dimensions of what I was building. "We specialize in bringing architectural visions to life," she said, reviewing my blueprints with professional appreciation, "and occasionally making statements in the process." The supplier negotiations, permit applications, and timeline projections consumed my evenings and weekends, but the intensive work provided unexpected healing. In creating something new, I was reclaiming parts of myself that had become entangled in James's betrayal. Each decision made independently, each problem solved through my own expertise, restored confidence that had been undermined during those final months of marriage. The preliminary soil testing and property survey confirmed the lot's viability for my ambitious design, though several specialized structural elements would require additional engineering consultations. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by these complications, I found myself energized by the creative problem-solving required, staying awake until 3 a.m. sketching alternative approaches that ultimately improved the overall design. When the final Permit applications were submitted, expedited through professional connections who recognized the project's architectural merit. I experienced a profound shift in emotional landscape. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into productive energy focused entirely on creation rather than loss. What had begun as reaction was evolving into something far more significant, a reclamation of my professional identity and personal agency through the very medium that had initially connected me to James. The groundbreaking ceremony wasn't the public spectacle typical of commercial projects, but a private ritual attended by 5 close friends who'd supported me through the separation. We gathered at sunrise, champagne in paper cups, as I ceremonially pushed a gold-painted shovel into soil that would soon support my new foundation. "To building what comes next," Sophia toasted, her arm around my shoulders as we surveyed the marked boundaries of what would become my architectural statement. Construction began the following Monday, heavy equipment arriving at 7 a.m. sharp to begin excavation for the basement level and foundational footings. I had arranged my client meetings to allow daily site visits, often arriving in business attire, that quickly became dust-covered as I consulted with Elena on material deliveries and structural alignments. 3 days into excavation, James drove slowly past the property, clearly shocked by the scale of activity. I pretended not to notice, his car idling at the curb, instead focusing intently on reviewing measurement calculations with the foundation contractor. The following week, Daniel filed a complaint with the neighborhood association, citing concerns about construction noise and potential property value impacts. My attorney, recommended by Dr. Martinez, who'd recognized the potential for legal complications, crafted a response that was professionally devastating in its precision, citing all relevant building permits, noise ordinance compliance documentation, and architectural renderings demonstrating the property's enhancement of neighborhood aesthetics. The pouring of the foundation, significantly larger than my previous home, marked the first major milestone, concrete trucks arriving in steady procession throughout a 12-hour day. I brought lunch for the entire crew, earning unexpected respect from veteran workers who noted my attention to structural details many homeowners overlooked. The scale of the foundation made the project's ambition visible for the first time, drawing curious neighbors who stopped to inquire about the design. "It's a personal vision," became my standard response, offering architectural highlights without revealing the emotional blueprint underlying the physical one. The framing stage transformed abstract plans into tangible reality, wooden skeletal structures rising to reveal the 3-story structure with dramatic rooflines and expansive window placements. From certain angles, the frame partially obscured views from my former home, a consequence I deliberately calculated during the design phase. James arrived unannounced one afternoon as roof trusses were being installed, approaching across the partially landscaped yard with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling conversations. "This seems excessive," he observed, gesturing toward the structure looming above us. "The lawyer said you're refusing mediation on the divorce." I maintained professional composure despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "My attorney has my complete instructions. This project is separate from our legal proceedings." His attempt to leverage the divorce to halt construction, claiming the property purchase had utilized marital assets despite my meticulous documentation of separate funds, was defeated by my attorney's thorough financial records and the construction loan's exclusive attachment to my independent credit. The completion of exterior framing coincided with neighborhood speculation reaching fever pitch, with several real estate agents requesting tours to evaluate comparable property values. The project had become something of a local sensation, featured in the community newsletter with carefully edited quotes from my interviews about architectural innovation rather than personal motivation. I established genuine friendships with several neighbors whose initial curiosity evolved into sincere interest in sustainable building techniques and modern architectural elements. The roof completion called for traditional celebration, though I skipped the superstitious evergreen tree sometimes placed atop new structures, instead gathering female friends for sunset champagne on the unfinished second floor, the expansive space offering perfect views of mountains to the west, and, incidentally, unobstructed perspective into what had once been my carefully designed gardens next door. Interior selections became exercises in authentic self-expression, selecting fixtures, finishes, and materials that reflected my aesthetic without compromise or consideration of another's preferences. The custom floating staircase, a sculptural element visible from the street through floor-to-ceiling windows, became the home's signature feature, its engineering complexity a testament to my professional connections and design ambition. James's approach shifted noticeably as construction progressed, his initial anger evolving into awkward reconciliation attempts, including an unexpected delivery of lilies, my favorite flowers, to the construction site with a card suggesting we talk about the future. I established firm boundaries about personal conversations, limiting interactions to necessary divorce proceedings while refusing to discuss the project or potential reconciliation. Through mutual friends, I learned that Daniel continued struggling financially despite mortgage-free living arrangements, with property taxes and maintenance costs exceeding his expectations. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house he'd acquired through manipulation was becoming a financial burden rather than the solution James had envisioned. Rather than satisfaction, I felt an unexpected compassion for Rebecca, whose quiet competence had been undermined by both brothers' financial mismanagement. The divorce finalization coincided with electrical and plumbing completion. Legal documents arrived for signature the same day I approved final placement of custom light fixtures throughout the main living spaces. Standing in the nearly completed great room, ceilings soaring 18 feet above herringbone hardwood floors, I experienced my first moment of genuine peace since discovering the betrayal 8 months earlier. The culmination of electrical work enabled installation of the architectural lighting system I designed to highlight the signature staircase, the illumination visible from the street creating dramatic nighttime presence. James called that evening, his tone suggesting he'd driven past and seen the lighting display. "Was all this really necessary, Olivia?" he asked, seeming genuinely confused. "It seems like you're trying to make some kind of statement." My response surprised even me with its lack of residual anger. "I'm not making a statement, James. I'm building a home that reflects who I am without compromise. There's a difference." The landscaping design, completed by an award-winning horticulturist, who'd become an unexpected friend during the project, strategically featured specimen trees and architectural plantings that enhanced the property's prominence while creating natural privacy screens from neighboring properties, except in very specific sightlines. Late-phase construction coincided with rumors that Daniel was considering selling the original house, the financial strain of ownership apparently exceeding his capacity despite rent-free living arrangements. The certificate of occupancy arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, the building inspector signing final approval documents with genuine compliments about construction quality and innovative design elements. After months of anticipation, the official permission to occupy my creation felt simultaneously momentous and surreal. The moving process from my temporary apartment to the completed mansion spanned a weekend, with professional movers handling furniture delivery while I personally transported architectural books, design awards, and the silver trowel James had given me at our original groundbreaking, now displayed in my home office as a reminder of lessons learned rather than promises broken. Unpacking each carefully selected item in spaces designed specifically for them brought unexpected emotional release, the physical arrangement of my possessions symbolizing the reconstruction of my identity, independent from betrayal and loss. The furniture I'd selected during construction, much of it custom-built by local artisans, fit perfectly into allocated spaces, as though the house and its contents had been conceived together as a unified expression. My home office placement had been deliberately calculated during design, positioned to overlook the original property with expansive windows and a private balcony offering unobstructed views of what had once been my garden, now somewhat neglected. Under Daniel and Rebecca's stewardship, the planning of my housewarming celebration became a joyful exercise in hospitality rather than the anxious performance I'd experienced during similar events in my previous life. The guest list included supporters who'd witnessed my journey: Dr. Martinez, Sophia, Elena, and key members of the construction team, neighbors who'd become friends, clients who'd provided flexible working arrangements during the build, and the banking team that had structured my financing. Notably absent were any invitations to James's family, though I did include Rebecca in a gesture of grace that recognized her position as collateral damage in the brothers' manipulation. The completed home, now fully furnished and styled, exceeded even my ambitious vision. 3 times the size of the original house, with architectural elements visible from every approach. The 2-story glass entry revealed the dramatic floating staircase illuminated by custom lighting, while the great room's clear-story windows captured morning light that reflected across the property line. My home office, positioned strategically, with views of both mountains and the neighboring property, became command central for my expanding design business, with client meetings now held in the purpose-built conference room rather than leased commercial space. The neighborhood response to the finished mansion ranged from admiration to barely concealed envy, with several residents requesting tours to inspire their own renovation projects. I observed Daniel and Rebecca watching from their driveway as delivery trucks arrived with art pieces and custom furnishings, their expressions unreadable from a distance, but their attention unmistakable. The evening before my official housewarming party, James appeared unannounced at my front door, his expression suggesting he'd rehearsed this moment but wasn't prepared for the reality of the completed structure. "I wanted to see it before tomorrow's event," he explained awkwardly. "Everyone's talking about what you've built." Against my better judgment, I allowed him a brief tour, watching his reactions as each space revealed another level of thoughtful design and personal expression. His silence as we moved through room after room of the magnificent interior spoke volumes, his occasional questions about specific features highlighting his growing recognition of what his betrayal had ultimately cost him. In the kitchen, a chef's paradise with double islands and professional-grade appliances, he finally spoke with genuine emotion. "This is incredible, Liv. I had no idea you were capable of something at this scale." The backhanded compliment crystallized everything that had gone wrong in our relationship, his fundamental underestimation of my capabilities and vision now physically manifested in the space surrounding us. As he prepared to leave, standing in the grand entryway beneath the sculptural lighting installation that had already been featured in a regional design magazine, James suggested tentatively that perhaps now that things were settled with the house and divorce, we might consider reconciliation. My response came without anger or vindictiveness, simply clarity. "What we had can't be rebuilt, James. Trust, once broken that completely, doesn't get repaired with apologies or time. I wish you well, but that chapter of my life is closed." The housewarming celebration the following evening became an emotional milestone. 60 guests exploring the spaces I'd created, offering genuine appreciation for both technical achievements and aesthetic choices. Sophia raised a toast midway through the evening, acknowledging the journey from architectural concept to physical reality, while tactfully avoiding mention of the circumstances that had initiated the project. Rebecca's absence was noted but unsurprising. Through mutual connections, I'd learned that Daniel had declined my invitation with obvious discomfort. The most surprising revelation came from a neighbor who'd become a friend during construction, who mentioned casually that Daniel had listed the original house for sale the previous week, apparently struggling with maintenance costs and property taxes beyond his financial capacity. James had reportedly moved into an apartment across town, the brothers' relationship strained by the financial arrangement that had supposed to benefit both but ultimately damaged everyone involved. The irony of their solution, causing cascading consequences for all parties, wasn't lost on me, though it brought no satisfaction. The following weeks brought professional recognition I hadn't anticipated, a feature in Architectural Digest highlighting innovative residential design, followed by interview requests from sustainable building publications interested in the energy-efficient systems integrated throughout the structure. My client roster expanded significantly as the home became something of a showcase for my design philosophy, with several high-profile projects offered based specifically on elements observed during industry events hosted in my great room. The most unexpected development came 3 months after moving in, when James appeared at my door with an elaborate bouquet and dinner reservation at the city's most exclusive restaurant. A grand reconciliation gesture that suggested he still fundamentally misunderstood the nature of what had broken between us. My gentle but firm rejection seemed to finally penetrate his confidence that our relationship could eventually be repaired, his expression shifting from hopeful to resigned as he accepted that some choices have permanent consequences beyond what's anticipated. Standing on my third-floor balcony that evening, looking down at the property I'd once considered the physical manifestation of love and partnership, I realized the view no longer triggered pain or anger, just a quiet recognition of how completely both the physical and emotional landscapes had transformed through my own deliberate actions. 6 months after moving into my new home, I awoke to morning light streaming through carefully positioned windows, illuminating a life reconstructed entirely on my own terms. My home office had evolved into headquarters for a thriving design business, with 3 junior architects now working from the converted carriage house I'd added during final construction phases. The mansion had been featured in architectural magazines and included in local design tours, my professional reputation enhanced by the innovative solutions demonstrated throughout the property. The journey from devastation to empowerment hadn't proceeded in a neat, linear progression. There were still occasional moments when grief would surface unexpectedly, triggered by memories or milestone dates. But those episodes diminished in both frequency and intensity as new experiences accumulated. The most unexpected development during this period was my evolving relationship with Rebecca, who contacted me shortly after her separation from Daniel, seeking both professional advice about returning to her abandoned teaching career and personal support during her own rebuilding process. Our coffee meetings evolved into genuine friendship founded on shared experience with the Taylor brothers' manipulative tendencies, though we tacitly avoided detailed discussions of either relationship. Through Rebecca, I learned that the original dream house had indeed been sold to cover Daniel's accumulated debts, with James relocating to Chicago for a fresh start with a different financial firm. The information registered as neutral fact, rather than emotionally significant news, confirming my healing progress was substantial and genuine. My weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had transitioned from crisis management to growth-focused discussions about establishing healthy boundaries in all relationships and recognizing early warning signs of incompatible values. The house was ultimately just a catalyst, she observed during a particularly insightful session. The real construction project was rebuilding your understanding of your own worth and capabilities. Processing emotions properly through continued therapy enabled me to reach a place of forgiveness without reconciliation, recognizing that while James's actions reflected profound character flaws and misplaced priorities, maintaining anger only limited my own forward progress. The capacity for trust that had been shattered during the betrayal slowly regenerated through new relationships established on transparent foundations. Though I approached romantic connections with appropriate caution and clearer expectations. Setting healthy boundaries became second nature across all areas of life: professional collaborations, family obligations, social commitments, with the physical boundaries of my property serving as tangible reminder of the importance of clearly delineated personal limits. An unexpected outlet for my experience emerged when I began mentoring other women navigating similar betrayals, informal coffee conversations that evolved into structured workshops about financial independence and rebuilding after relationship dissolution. These sessions eventually led to establishing a foundation, providing architectural services and financial guidance for women transitioning from destabilizing life situations, with quarterly fundraising events hosted in my great room becoming highlights of the local social calendar. Family holidays, once dominated by James's relatives and their established traditions, transformed into celebrations reflecting my authentic preferences and values. Thanksgiving dinner now featured friends from diverse backgrounds, contributing signature dishes from their cultural traditions, while Christmas evolved into a week-long open house where people could connect briefly or linger for deeper conversations, depending on their comfort level. The most profound realization occurred exactly 1 year after discovery of the deed transfer, when I drove past the original house and felt nothing beyond aesthetic appreciation for certain design elements I'd incorporate differently in future projects. The property that had once represented everything I valued had become simply another house, meaningful only as the catalyst that had ultimately led to greater self-discovery and authentic expression. The lessons about resilience and self-worth transformed every aspect of my professional approach, from client interactions to design philosophy, with a new emphasis on creating spaces that evolved with inhabitants rather than constraining their growth. The freedom of making decisions solely based on my own needs, preferences, and values remained the most valuable outcome of the painful journey. Each choice, from paint colors to client selection, representing an affirmation of my reclaimed agency and independent vision. On the anniversary of moving into the mansion, I hosted a small dinner party on the expansive balcony overlooking the city, surrounding myself with friends who'd witnessed both my devastation and reconstruction. As sunset painted the sky in spectacular oranges and purples, I raised a toast that encapsulated the journey's ultimate lesson: to building the life you want, rather than accepting the limitations others impose. Looking out over twinkling city, lights from the home I'd created entirely through my own vision and determination, I felt a profound peace that transcended the circumstances that had initiated this chapter. The painful loss of what I'd thought I wanted had ultimately led to gaining what I truly needed. Not just a more impressive structure, but the unshakable knowledge that I possessed everything necessary to create solid foundations, regardless of what storms might come. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better in your life? Something that felt devastating in the moment, but pushed you to build something stronger? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and rebuilding in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more. Reflections on overcoming life's unexpected challenges and building something beautiful from difficult beginnings. Thank you for sharing this journey with me today. May you always find the strength to redesign your life when the original blueprints no longer serve you.